All right, hello once again. Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College Application and Website Development, or AWD1100 C# Programming Fundamentals course, I have been doing a series of video presentations based on the PowerPoint slides for the textbook we're using for the class, that being Muroc C# 7th edition, like you can see on your screen here. And so far, I have done presentations for chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 11. I just skipped ahead to 11, so I'm going to do 9 right now and then 10. So chapter 9, as you can see, it's how to work with dates and strings. So let me bring up the associated PowerPoints. Whoops. And we'll get started. All right, so as you can see from our cover page here, how to work with dates and strings. All right. And as always with these chapters, we will start with our objectives. So our applied objectives, the first ones here, basically we want to be able to understand the basic date functions and the basic string functions, all right, that C# provides for you, okay? And there's more to it than that, but more than anything else, that's what it is. So you'll notice here that it's a date time class that you typically use. And notice with date time, now the stuff that's in here, you give it a year, you give it a month, you give it a day. You can optionally, and that's what these brackets here mean, you can optionally provide for it an hour and a minute and a second. Now, I have never done this where I've also provided for a millisecond or a thousandth of a second, but you can do that also. Now, we've done a little bit of work so far with parsing, and you'll notice that, remember, that when you read that information in, if you're grabbing it, let's say, from a text box, it is going into a string. So here we're attempting to parse it or convert it from a string to a date time variable. All right, there's an actual conversion. There we're trying to convert. So here's some examples right here. I'm not going to read these out loud to you. You will notice from the first example that if we do not specify a time, the time defaults to 12 midnight. Okay? All right. So here are some of the valid date and time formats. Okay? And most of the ones are the ones that you're familiar with. Okay? Some of the ones such as using the year first, etc. Some of these are probably more prevalent in other countries. All right? Okay. So as it says, we've got a couple properties that we can use for getting the date and the time. So notice if you say date time.now, you can see real quick what you get. You get the current date and you get the current time. If you just use today, you get only the current date. All right, I don't think, since we didn't set a time, it automatically, again, defaults to midnight. All right, so here's some of the methods that you can use, and you'll notice that they're all two methods. They're all used for formatting the date and the time. And again, why would you do that? Well, this would be especially important if you were creating some kind of a report. All right, so you'll notice the too long date string, as it says, it's got the name for the day of the week, the name for the month, the day of the month, and the year. The short has numbers for those same things. The too long time string and the too short time string work in a similar manner, but for the time as opposed to the date. So again, here are some examples. Okay. Properties for working with dates and times. What they're saying in English here is you can pluck out any part of this thing that you need. So the entire date, just the month, just the day, just the year, and from the time, just the hour, just the minute, just the second. All right, time of day, day of week. Now I could be wrong on this, but I do not believe that I am. I believe this starts with 0, so I believe that 0 is Sunday, which would mean 6 would be Saturday, 0, 1 through 6. All right. There are some methods, as it says, for working with dates and time. Days in a month, This is kind of nice, the is leap year, because you used to have to write your own leap year method. Not that it was terrible, all right, but you know, it's nice to have something built in for you. So again, you can see in these examples here, we pluck off just the month, the hour, the current date and time, the number of days that are in the month, all right, and the whether or not it's a leap year. All right. Now, it says code that uses day of week property and in enumeration. Now, do you have to do that? Of course not. All right, but they've got a thing here called current time day of week. And once they do that, now you can literally use the words Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. There are very few operations typically you're going to want to do on dates and times. As it shows there, you might do an add. So if you were creating an application for someone where their bill was due in 90 days, you might do an add months and put 3 in there or something, or an add days and put 90 in there. You can also subtract to find the difference between two dates. For instance, if you were to put in the current date and subtract from that the date you were born, you could find out how many days you've been on this earth. And again, here are some examples. You'll notice 3-1, we're adding 2 to it, so it becomes 5-1. All right, 430, we're adding 60 days to it. So 3-1 goes to 430. All right, we can do the same kind of things with minutes, hours, and seconds. Okay. Now, a variable type that you'll quite often use, as shown in here, is a time span variable. I don't want to read it to you so you can take a look at it. It confuses people sometimes to know that it works with what are called ticks. But basically a tick is like a second, I believe. Again, there's the minus operator to subtract one date from another. You can check and see if one date is greater than the other date. But again, the key thing here is there are limited things that you can actually use, or limited operations that you can use on dates and times. So let's jump out to strings. Now, unlike JavaScript, when you are working with a pure string, in other words, more than one character especially, you need double quotes. If you tried using single quotes with the line right here, you'd get an error message. And you'd get an error message because it's the old proverbial trying to stuff 10 pounds worth into a 5-pound bag. If you use a single quote, it's a char, or a character variable. And here you see how we could grab and pluck out the first character or the second character from our string right here. You can loop through all the letters in an array or in any kind of string, is be a better way to put it, to pull out the individual letters. You can use a for loop, or as they show right there as an example, you could use a for each loop. All right. Some of the common methods for working with a string class, okay, things like substring, to lower, to upper, and trim, the bottom ones that are right there, we have worked with before. All right, or if you've done any work with JavaScript, you've worked with them before. Many of them should just make sense when you take a look at, does it start with a certain letter? Does it end with a certain letter? Index of starts a search for a string or a substring at the beginning. Last index of basically will kind of start from the end. There's inserts. You can use padding, etc. And as always, they'll give you some examples here. And as we've talked about before, so notice the index of. So what we're asking for here is, where is the first blank space? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, whoops, it is 0 based. All right. Since it's only a single character, you can search either for the empty string or an empty character. All right. Now you'll notice here they're searching for ink. If you run one of these string functions and something does not exist, it'll return -1. So here, where's the last instance of a blank space? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Right there, that's why 15 is returned. All right. All right. And again, most of the ones that are in here, if you use the 2 upper or the 2 lower, that should just make sense to you, okay? You can copy one string to another string. All right, if you do that, so if I say string 1 equals this, string 2 equals string 1, all right, that literally is making a copy. It's not giving you 2 references to the same copy. It's making 2 different copies. So if you change S2, S1 does not change. All right. So here they're doing the trim function, which removes any beginning or ending strings, but no beginning or ending spaces, rather, but no spaces within the string itself. All right. Here they're doing some work with parsing, and I believe that the program at the end of the chapter, which we'll go over in a little bit, I believe that does some parsing as well. There's a split method. So notice after you do the split, okay, that it basically throws it into an array where this would be the 0th element, the 1 element, and the 2 element. Okay? And we'll look at that more, like I said, later. Here's the same kind of thing with a phone number, and the examples they give at the end. There are 3 or 4 different programs at the end of the chapter. We'll do a couple of those. All right. Code that replaces hyphens with slashes, again, should be fairly obvious. Could go the other way just as well. Syntax for the try parse, we've looked at these already. You can parse something, but typically parsing with a string isn't as big a thing, because if you're reading something, for example, using a user interface where you're grabbing it out of a text box, it's in a string already. Now, the number styles, I don't think I've ever used these. Any of these. There's nothing wrong with them at all. I'm just saying there's other ways of doing it, and you typically will end up getting comfortable doing something, in a certain way, and that's the way that you'll do it. All right. Null references. As it says in the Solution Explorer, you can right mouse click on the project name and select Properties. Then select Build Category and select from the Nullable dropdown, click Enable. All right. So what does that mean? If you do that, you are allowing null values. Remember that null means unknown. All right. So how to declare a nullable reference type? Okay, so the question mark there is basically saying that this can hold a null. And here you're saying if whatever message is, it might be the value that's in a text box or something else, or maybe it's just something set in the program. If it's not null, figure out its length. You don't want to try to run the length function on a null string. Okay, it can lead to programmatic errors. It says there, a statement that may display a warning, from what I just told you. How to stop the warning. So again, this is just basically saying run the length function if message is not null. All right, string builders are kind of neat because strings basically, and this is a little bit hard to understand. I know, and I'm not saying this is going to be the most stellar explanation you've ever heard, but I know when this was explained to me, I found this a little bit hard to understand. That if I'm writing a program and I say string name equals Jeff, then later on in my program, I'm just going to put ... meaning that there's other code in the program. But if later on in the program I put, they want my whole name, and I do that, that's totally legal. I can go from Jeff to Jeffrey or Jeffrey to Jeff. That doesn't matter. All right. But what's important here is when I do this, someplace in memory, at some address in memory, space is allocated for Jeff. If I reset it here, what ends up happening is a different space in memory is allocated for Jeffrey. You might say, well, why is that? Well, what if I allocated this for Jeff, but right next to it was the value of another variable? I wouldn't have room then to add the REY in there. All right. So strings are known as immutable. And what that means is that doesn't mean they can't be changed, but that means when you do change them, all right, what happens is they get a new address in memory. The old address then basically gets flagged as being unused. And when the operating system comes around and is checking for references to memory that aren't being used any longer, it'll get rid of that. All right. Now, what if I don't want to do that? Well, I could do something like this. I could create a string builder object. And I believe that that's like this. So I could say string builder, and I could say here first name equals, let's make it Jeffrey. All right, I'm going to say middle name, and my middle name is Paul. And last name, and then finally, I would probably do something like this. I'm just going to put this over 2 lines. Maybe we'll read in 3 lines. All right. So the advantage of using a string builder object is a string builder object is mutable. And what happens actually with a string builder object is if you create a new string builder object and you don't give it a size like this, its size is automatically set. It's automatically set to 16. Once that 16 is reached, it automatically doubles. So if I'd reached 16 characters, boom, the size of the string builder doubles to 32. If I reach that, boom, it doubles to 64, then to 128, then to 256, etc. All right? And they give some examples in here. Some of the things that you can do with the string builder class. Now, we don't do a lot of work in here where we're doing a lot of report writing and stuff like that. In fact, we do basically none. So I'm not saying that you'd never use this, but in here, in this class, you'll probably use this, let's just put it this way, not real often. All right? But it's, again, maybe we'll even use this in one of the programs at the end of the chapter. I don't know. Haven't written them yet. All right. There is a format command, and we have talked about this a little bit before. For instance, we've used the C, which can be upper or lowercase. All right. And that's for currency. We have used the N in upper or lowercase, which means it's a number. We've used the P for percentage, and you can see there are other ones as well. I'm not going to sit and read each one to you. All right. So here's some formatting codes that you can put in. This will be very similar, especially these first two, to what we will use next, well, in the 4th semester for the Java class. Okay, and here's some examples. Now, what's interesting here is with these examples, we have not done things like this before. This is a string.format, and this could just as easily be a variable name as a number. What this says is the 0th element, which is this, format it to currency. which will make it look like this. Now here's a much more complex format. This says it should have a $sign. It should have a digit, a comma, 2 more digits. Now these digits here mean only add the digit if it's greater than 0. All right. So if this was an amount that was just cents, it would have the 0 point and then 33, let's say for 33 cents. This says if it's a negative number, put it inside of parentheses. Don't put the negative sign there. Again, you oftentimes see this on accounting like reports. And there's a couple of other examples here as well. All right, just like there are formatting codes for dollars and cents, strings, date and time have formatting codes as well. And you can look at those. And I'm sure that in just a minute, there will be some examples. And there they are. Now, interpolation, all right, they're talking in there about an interpolated string, okay? And if we look at this right here, it says string balance equals, well, notice they're doing the stuff basically, the formatting they're doing right inside of here. And in order to do this, this $sign is used with interpolation, all right? I use interpolation, but not too much in C#, but I do in other languages. All right. Converting a number and a date, so you can see that looks pretty ugly there, but it looks pretty nice here. All right, so the rest of the chapter here are some exercises. So it says calculate the age for a given birth date. Maybe we'll do this one right here. All right. So I think what I'll do is I'm going to, as I've been doing, and that is I'm going to do a print screen here, paste that in, grab just what I need, grab all of this here. So that's the one that we will be creating. So for instance, if I put in here today's date, which is the 18th of, or Monday, July 18th, 2022, and if the birth date, let's just say, was January 1st, 2000, all right, then the age would be 22, okay? So we'll look at that one. And so that's work with dates and times. And let's grab one of these for strings. Let's be able to edit a phone number. So if we put it in like this, we can print out just the digits or a standard format. All right, so I'll grab that one as well. Let's see. Pardon my mess there. So we'll grab that one right here. All right. So we will have one that's edit a phone number, and we will have one that is age calculation. All right. I believe at least we have finished the chapter. I'm not going to do this enhance the future value or this reservation totals or this work with strings. It's right here. We could do that one as well. All right. I don't like pig Latin programs. So that'll be it for this chapter. When I get back, after I'm going to next do those 2 programs, but afterwards we're going to go into chapter 10, which is more skills for working with Windows forms and controls. All right, so I'll be back to start going over the program right here in just a couple minutes.